Morning, everyone. You're all very welcome to this webinar all about how to get the most from coaching. I'm Richard. I'm going to facilitate this session, and I've got a few little points of housekeeping to cover off before we dive into the main content. But thank you for making the time to join me for this. I hope it meets your expectations. First of all, the session is being recorded, and I'll be sharing an edited version of this online in the coming week. So you'll be able to share that with colleagues who couldn't make it or revisit portions of the session again. I'm also going to be sharing all of the slides I walked through this morning, as well as some other resources. So I'll be reaching out to you via the email address you used to register for this session, and you'll get a downloadable pack in the next couple of days. Thirdly, you'll be able to ask questions at any point. Now, we do have time for a Q&A session at the very end of my presentation, but please, as thoughts, comments, questions occur to you, you can drop them in to the webinar chat. So if you'd like to just drop in a hello into the chat now, or let me know where you're dialing in from, we can make sure that it's working for everyone. So feel free to do that at any point as we go through. Any questions, anything you'd like me to pause and revisit, we can do that as we go through. And finally, the next webinar in this ongoing series, these are quarterly free webinars exploring topics in coaching, is going to take place on the 24th of July. And I'll be joined by my colleague, Dr. Rachel Skews, for an examination of how we can use coaching in the workplace to support employees who are living with chronic health conditions. It's a really big topic in well-being in the workplace. There's a very large proportion of employees are living with a chronic health condition, but they're not always supported in the way that they might be. So we want to look at the evidence for and the methods that we can use to support those colleagues. So that's July 24th. We'll be promoting that in the coming weeks, and you'll get the same notice to be able to sign up and join us for that as well. So let's get cracking. If we haven't met before, I'm Richard. I'm an accredited workplace psychologist. I've been doing what I do for over 20 years now. And you can find out more if you want to about me via the links at the bottom of the screen there. WorkLifePsych.com will take you to the homepage, and you can find out more there. But I've put two links there, one specifically to the YouTube channel, which a large proportion of the videos there focus on coaching and myths about coaching and understanding coaching, because it's really the reason I set up the channel, is to demystify coaching. So I will also reference a couple of links to specific videos you might be interested in when I send through the resources. And we have a specific page on the website, as you might expect, outlining our approach to coaching. And there's lots of jumping off points from that page to find out more about it. But please feel free to get in touch one-on-one if you have follow-up questions about me or our approach or anything else that I covered today. So what am I going to cover this morning? I want to start with the essentials. I want to answer some questions that I get asked a lot about what coaching actually is. What are we talking about when we talk about coaching in the workplace, and what's it good for? And then want to walk through some of the really common myths or misunderstandings that I've encountered in my career. And given that I started this business coming up to 10 years ago, and I've been coaching solidly for coming up to 15 years, there are a lot of consistent misunderstandings that I encounter. And I want to share them, not to criticize anyone, but to illustrate these are sort of commonly accepted. And I want to challenge them and explain why they're not really helpful, why they're not necessarily true. And then the main meat of this session is to look at what are the factors that contribute to coaching that help us get the results we're looking for. How do we, in other words, get the best out of our coaching experience? When I talk about this topic to groups, when I write about it, I really want to underline the point that you're making an investment, or a member of your team is making an investment, or your organization is making an investment in coaching. It's going to be an investment of time. It's going to be an investment of effort. And of course, there's going to be a financial investment. So you want to recoup the maximum return from that investment. And there are some very simple things that you can build into coaching to ensure that you do recoup the investment that you've made. They're very simple, yet they're often ignored. So, I also want to talk a little bit about how you can source a coach. Now, I could just say, come talk to me, but I don't want to do that. I want to talk about some of the factors that contribute to effective coaching on the part of the coach. And I also want to talk about some of the things that organizations need to bear in mind when they're introducing coaching, some very simple pitfalls that they can avoid to maximize the benefits of coaching, and really importantly, ensure that it's thought of appropriately, ensure that it's considered in the right way and it's being used in the right way. Because a point I'll make a few times this morning: coaching is not a cure-all. It's not the answer to everything. It is a very powerful developmental intervention, but it's not good for everything. So we want to be clear about that. And then I'll wrap up before our Q&A by signposting some places you can find some further answers to your questions. But please, at any point, drop those into the webinar chat box. You should be able to find that via the main menu on the Zoom window, and I will pause and answer it, or I will let you know that I'm going to be answering that question a little bit later on. So let's start with the basics. What do we mean by coaching? What is it? If you have a working definition of coaching you'd like to share with us, please feel free to drop it into the chat, or what the word coaching prompts in your mind when you hear it or you read it. The challenge with coaching is that there are several competing operational definitions. And then there's a plethora of, I'm pointing out the window here, an absolute plethora of sort of civilian understandings of what coaching is. I want to share two with you. One is more academic and detailed, and one is the one that I use with my clients and organizations on a day-to-day basis. First of all, I consistently share this from Professor Stephen Palmer, a very esteemed and experienced and well-published coaching psychologist. He talks about the ultimate aims of coaching being to facilitate personal and professional growth, learning, and optimal functioning. So the initial motivation is a focus on optimization and improvement of performance, as opposed to the elimination of any problems. That might challenge your view of what coaching is. Maybe it's a very different perspective to ones that you've encountered before. But the reason I really like it is that we're not necessarily starting with a problem. We might be helping an individual move from good to great. We might be helping someone navigate something that everyone goes through, not necessarily a problem, maybe an opportunity. Maybe it's about navigating as they go through a promotion. And who would say a promotion is a problem? And yet, coaching can really help someone unlock their potential, see new opportunities for thinking, feeling, and behaving, and allow them to navigate that with ease rather than it becoming a problem. I also like the fact that this is about the personal and the professional. Now, I will be really honest that one of the phrases that sort of brings me out in a rash is life coaching, because it doesn't really mean much. And at the same time, it means thousands of different things to different people. But a point I want to come back to later is that the coaching we do in the workplace, well, we can maximize our gains from that by exploring how we can apply what we've learned in the workplace coaching scenario, in that context, apply that to our personal life and any of the roles we have outside of work. And it's an experience I get feedback on consistently when clients realize this works anywhere. This new skill, this new perspective, it works anywhere. It's not just a workplace skill. Now, that's a nice definition. It's a positive definition. It's an accessible one, I think, but it's a bit wordy and it's not exactly memorable. So when I talk about coaching, when someone asks me what coaching is, or when I'm presenting to a prospective client, I talk about coaching representing a move from being stuck to unstuck. Now, I said a moment ago, it's not necessarily about problems. But if you want to connect with someone and allow them to understand what coaching could be like for them, we explore it as stuck to unstuck, stuck in terms of maybe some attitudes or thinking patterns, or stuck in terms of a decision that needs to be made, stuck in terms of habits that no longer serve them, stuck in terms of the views they hold of themselves or the world around them that are not necessarily helping them anymore. Now, unstuck really implies allowing them to learn more about themselves so that they can do different things. No longer stuck in one pattern, but seeing the opportunity to try different ways of approaching the same scenario, context, challenge, opportunity. So, what could be some examples of that? I want to illustrate that with some clear examples. The kinds of topics that come up in the work that I and my colleagues do with our clients. First of all, I hinted at it a few moments ago. Adapting to new situations could be your first 100 days in a new organization. It could be your first 100 days in a new, more senior position. Maybe you could be adapting to a new way of working. Maybe it's working remotely or in a blended approach. Whatever the situation is, change doesn't happen like the flicking of a switch. And the transition period is a great opportunity to work with a coach, to reflect on what has been and what could be, and plot a journey through that transition so that adaptation is a positive one. Oops, we might find the very evergreen topic of procrastination coming up. Procrastination is a version of stuck where we're avoiding something and we're avoiding the discomfort associated with a task or an activity, and we're avoiding it by pushing it into the future with the belief the future me will take care of this. And that optimism is often misplaced because future me is just like me because it's tomorrow or next week. And everyone procrastinates from time to time, but what we know about people who procrastinate on a chronic basis, that it can really put a dent in their well-being. And that is because of the stress that procrastination causes. We might explore how we can move from unhealthy, maladaptive to more functional and helpful coping strategies. Everything that we do in response to challenges and setbacks could be called coping. But as you'll probably realize from your own lived experience, not all of those responses are necessarily helpful or healthy or sustainable, things that we can do over the longer term. So a big part of the well-being based coaching that I do helps people replenish their toolkits when it comes to coping and be aware of and be more intentional about the way that they respond to life's inevitable challenges and setbacks. Maybe we get some feedback and we don't know what to do with that. We don't know how to respond to it. We don't know how to turn it into something actionable. Maybe we can't get past it. A very common example is getting a 360-degree feedback report and being quite stunned and a little bit hurt by what appears in that, or looking for a new way to elicit feedback because you're not getting any. And people, maybe because you're a leader, are a little bit reticent to share what they think you could do differently or more of or less of. A big area where we can bring additional clarity is around career options. Now, whether it's someone at the very beginning of their career, mid-career, or approaching the end of their career, there are aspects of our psychology that are super relevant here. And this stuck to unstuck is a really nice way of looking at this. We might be stuck in our thinking about what a career looks like or what a career path should be, or that dreaded phrase, successful. And what does that mean? And shake that up and add some flexibility so people are able to see there are multiple ways I can live my working life. There are multiple routes I could take, and then begin to plan for how they can make those changes that they want to. Imposter syndrome. Um, I mean, who hasn't experienced some self-doubt about their own abilities? And to be honest, realistic self-doubt can be helpful, keeps us grounded, but when it is something that really shakes our belief in ourselves and we continually have thoughts about we don't deserve this role or we don't have the skills and the necessary personal qualities to do the role, it can lead to all kinds of unintended consequences, not least of which is anxiety and stress and longer working hours. So that's an example of stuck in thoughts about yourself and buying into the stories you're telling yourself about yourself. And this is where the form of coaching that we do works really, really well. We use a framework called acceptance and commitment theory, or ACT, and that's all about questioning our thoughts. It's all about having a flexible self-concept, It's all about doing the stuff that matters, not necessarily just the stuff that's comfortable or easy or familiar. We might be more avoidance here, avoiding the conversations that really need to happen. Now, this is a surprisingly common topic, and it's not just for people in the early part of their career. I have this kind of conversation with clients all the way up to the most senior levels because some conversations are just uncomfortable by their very nature, or because of who's involved, or because of the context that the parties are in. So moving from stuck, I'm just going to send a text message or I'm going to do this in an email, to exploring the different unstuck options of planning and really focusing on the conversation and having a superior conversation. It's very easy for us all to find change difficult, particularly if we haven't put our hand up and requested the change or instigated the change. So again, it's not necessarily a problem that needs solving, but more an upskilling so that someone's able to navigate that change, whatever form it's taking. Now, just some of the examples of the way that we talk about stuck to unstuck. In addition, all of the really classic examples of coaching that you might think about. Coaching for picking up a new position, coaching for new levels of seniority, coaching people who have very strong and apparent strengths and have been identified as what is sometimes called high potential, but coaching so that they can moderate those strengths and not derail their career by overplaying their strengths. So many different ways we can bring coaching to life. But let me now turn to some of the myths about coaching, some of the myths and misunderstandings. Now, before I dive in and give you some answers and share my perspective, I'd love to hear from you. If you'd like to drop into the chat any myths you've heard about coaching or any statements or beliefs that you think might be untrue or misunderstandings or generalizations. Have a think about that. And I'd love to see them pop up into the chat. Why is it important to challenge myths about coaching? There's a couple of different perspectives on this. So, one is maintaining the appropriate reputation of coaching. What do I mean by that? I've kind of lost count over the years of the number of times I've had to have a conversation with a new client who has previously worked with a coach. And that coaching experience was disastrous for them because the coach that they worked with before bought into some of these myths or responded to some of these myths and changed how they did things or simply behaved in an unprofessional way. So there's the reputational bit. And there's also the thing I'm really passionate about, which is, educating everyone as to what it is and what it's not. Being an evidence-based practitioner means using what works. And we know what works and how it works and for whom it works. What does the evidence support? And so many of the misunderstandings about coaching refer more to maybe best practice. And as an evidence-based practitioner, I'd say best practice is more um, properly labeled common practice. It's not necessarily something that works. So it's important to challenge these, but not in a hypercritical way. Just gently remind people that's not necessarily true, or it's not necessarily applicable in all situations. So I've just seen something pop up in the chat from Emma. Thank you, Emma. You're guaranteed results just by getting a coach. Oh, that's such a good example. Absolutely. And I'm going to explain why that's a myth when we talk about some of the things that we really need to do when we're working with a coach to get those results. Just by having a coach doesn't get you anything. No more than me having gym membership makes me physically fit. What's the missing ingredient? I need to go to the gym. What's the missing ingredient in coaching? There's quite a few of them. So I'm going to share those a little bit later. So thanks for that, Emma. That's a really, really common one. Let me walk you through some of the others. And if you've heard it before, or if you've heard a variation on a theme, do let me know. So the first of these is a sort of generic belief that coaching is a panacea or a cure-all, or we can use coaching for everything. This is often something I encounter when HR professionals are finding a coach for a colleague. And it sometimes seems that no matter what the context, particularly if they're senior, coaching is the answer. Now, coaching is powerful, and we know how it works, and we know why it works, and we know for what it works, but it doesn't work for everything. And there are lots of times when actually training is more appropriate. There's lots of opportunities for mentoring to be the more appropriate response. And sometimes what some employees need is not coaching from a third party, but support and guidance from their own manager. There's no need to involve a third party because the context doesn't really demand it. On that note, another really common one is that coaching is somehow just for executives. Only senior people get coaching. I challenge that regularly, and I coach individuals from their very first week in the workplace all the way through to CEOs and the rest of the C-suite. Yes, but coaching can work just as well for someone who's on an apprentice scheme as it can for the people that sit around the top table. And one of the things I'll share with you after today is a model we use called Coach on Campus, which sort of democratizes access to coaching by making places available to lots of people concurrently rather than fixed coaching agreements with named individuals. A really common one that I cover off in what we call a chemistry meeting when we're talking to each other about might we work together is that I don't make decisions for my clients. Coaching is not about telling someone what to do or giving them the answer to their conundrum. Because if I tell someone what to do, that's just from my perspective. I can't get into your head. We can talk about it, but I cannot make a good quality decision for you and then you feel that it's authentically your decision. We'll talk about options. We'll talk about how to improve the quality of decision making. We'll talk about the need to be intentional and rely on things like values and evidence rather than emotions to make good quality decisions. This is often a source of minor disappointment, let's say, early days with a new coachee when they say, "What should I do?" I go, "Oh, I'm not going to tell you, but let's explore the options you've been looking at." This is a bit of a challenging one. The myth that anyone can be a coach. On the one hand, of course, anyone can be a coach. But as I'll come back to later, they need to get trained. This is in the same way that you could say anyone can be a manager. Well, yes, but only if they are appropriately developed and trained and have the capacity to bring those skills and personal qualities to life. When I often hear this, it's in a slightly derisive, well, anyone could do that. You know, it's a little bit like coaching's just a conversation. Coaching's just a chat. Well, it's not. Yes, we have a coaching conversation, but that's a conversation with intent. It's a conversation that is structured using methods and evidence. And outside of that conversation, coaching continues when the coachee goes back into their life and experiments, tries new things, reflects, sees what's working for them, experiments again, and then we have another conversation. So it's not just a series of chats, and it's also not just a series of goal setting conversations. Coaching is not goal setting, and goal setting is not coaching. We might use goals within coaching. We might also have an extremely impactful coaching process without any goals. My colleague Rachel and I recorded a podcast several months ago looking at specifically the dark side of goal setting. Because it can go wrong for us. And at the same time, we can achieve great things or make great changes without the need for goal setting. So they're not interchangeable. Goal setting is a tool, and it may be part of the coaching toolkit. It may not. Very serious one that I want to challenge is that coaching is a somehow easy alternative to therapy. Again, these are sometimes mixed up, particularly when it's a coaching psychologist that's doing the work. Therapy is the correct response to certain life challenges and mental health conditions. We do not cover those topics in the world of coaching. And that's a very important part of learning to be a professional coach is to stay in your lane and to focus on what you are qualified and equipped to deal with. But of course, it's also not therapy. And so, therefore, it's a great place to go and work on the aspects of your life that don't necessarily prevent you from being your best self or living your life, but are further down the continuum. Now, a lot of the skills we bring to life are the same: listening, being objective, having a deep care for our clients and bringing empathy, but also holding people accountable for what they say they're going to do. But it's really important to recognize that coaching is not the place to address extreme anxiety, for example, or substance abuse or relationship difficulties. So it is a completely separate activity, even though there might be some commonalities in the kinds of skills that we're bringing to life. And finally, there's a sort of a basket of misunderstandings that I encounter in workplace coaching when it is being communicated by the client that somehow, if it's suggested that you work with a coach, it's a punishment for poor performance, that it's a reward for being good, or that if you have a coach, it's some kind of beneficial status symbol. And none of those are true. In fact, we really want to avoid framing coaching as a punishment or a reward. All coaching is a one-to-one development activity. So you're investing in your development with your time and your effort to work with one other person, because sometimes that's much more appropriate than going on a training course. But having a coach doesn't make you special. Having a coach doesn't make you a suboptimal. Having a coach means that you're just working with a development professional. It's as simple as that. Now, I don't have enough slides and we don't have enough time to go through every single misunderstanding when it comes to coaching. But my ask of you is that over the next few days and weeks, as you think about coaching, note the strongly held beliefs you have about coaching and ask yourself what evidence you have for that belief or whether there might be another perspective. So let's talk about the main event here, which is what are the things that we need to be mindful of that will contribute to the outcomes we're looking for? How do we get a good result in coaching? So I want to look at this from a couple of different perspectives. As I said, I want to cover off what to avoid in the workplace when introducing coaching. What is it that you want to do to set people up for success when they're going to work with a coach? But I also want to look at what the individual themselves can do and do more of to maximize the wins they're going to get from the coaching experience. I'd like to start, though, by sharing two evidence-based perspectives, 2 points of data, if you like. The first of these, and both of them are from a similar source that you can find, and I recommend to people regularly, the team at Science for Work. You can find them at scienceforwork.com. What they do is they take good quality evidence papers, journal articles, and so on, and then they rewrite them, simplify them, make them accessible on the web for free so that you can search what's the evidence for this? What's the evidence for that? And they explain why it's good evidence or less powerful evidence, and they explain why there might be weaknesses in the research and so on. So the first thing in one of the papers they reviewed recently was pointing out that when coaches are certified, externally certified, and they are evidence-based in their approaches, when they use behavioral science, in other words, psychology, they get the greatest impact. And that makes sense, doesn't it? But this is a relatively recent finding that when we have these things in place, we get a better result. And secondly, from a different paper, but from the same website, when we have coaching that is informed by psychological theory, it gets us better results. What does that mean? Aren't all coaching interventions based on psychology? Not really. A lot of what is done is based on received wisdom or beliefs that don't necessarily hold water when we look at them from a scientific perspective. So there's things that just won't go away, like you can divide personality into boxes or types, or that people have desired learning styles, and that you can adapt the environment to match those learning styles. These are sort of zombie myths that just won't go away. But when we have coaching that's informed by theory, and that theory stands up to scrutiny, that's what's going to get us results, not oversimplified or, yeah, effectively myths about how we think, feel, and behave. Now, sometimes it doesn't matter about these myths. Like a really common one I hear all the time is it takes 30 days to start a new habit. So that's not true. But what that does do is indicate it's going to take a while to build a habit, but you know what? It's not going to be 30 days. There's no magic number. It's dependent on you, the habit, your environment, and lots of other factors. Now, but if someone believed a lot of these myths, and if a coach believed a lot of these myths, then the coaching is not going to be as effective. In fact, it could cause more harm than good. So I really recommend you check out the Science for Work website. They're a great team, an international team of really good scientists, and they're great communicators because the average person does not want to sit down with a 20-page journal article. They want to get, what's the bullet points? What do I need to know? When working with a coach, the last thing you want to do is appear bulletproof or invincible or always positive, even when you're not feeling it. Don't agree if you disagree. Ask questions if you don't understand. Be open about what you're experiencing and what you want to get from it, because if there isn't honesty, then we're not on the same page. It doesn't always feel comfortable, but it's really, really important. Secondly, treat your coaching like a project at work. What does that mean? Well, if you think about any projects you're working on right now, you'll have something you're working towards. There's an outcome that is desirable, right? So it might be a goal. It might be just the completion of a series of tasks, but you know where you want to get to with a project. Secondly, if you're working on it, you've got time dedicated to that in your schedule. So if I looked at your calendar, it would have appointments and time set aside to work on the project. And so it is with coaching. And thirdly, you will have tasks in your to-do list in order to move you towards the end point. And so it is with coaching. We need to take action. We need to see this as an ongoing activity over a period of time. So typically, I'll work with an individual in a program of 6 months. We'll have one session per month for 6 months. And I encourage them to view that as a 6-month project, not 6 separate meetings. We all have so many meetings these days. We can approach them in a very automatic pilot kind of way. So instead of I have a meeting each month, I need to get ready just for that meeting, it's no, I'm in coaching. And I need to maintain my focus on this for a 6-month period, not 24/7, but to remain mindful of why am I working with a coach? What changes am I trying to make? And not fall into the trap of a kind of a Sunday night homework, the day before the coaching session. Oh, I've done nothing for a month. I better make some notes, or I better come up with some questions. Maintain the focus on it. This sounds super obvious, but I need to call it out. Nothing will change if there's no action. So I can have the gym membership card, but unless I go to the gym, I'm not going to get results. And in coaching, unless I take action, when I leave my coaching session, unless I follow through on my commitments and I do stuff, then nothing is really going to change. Now, what's the stuff someone might do? Well, based on the examples I shared earlier, they might be experimenting with new ways of coping with challenges and setbacks. They might be practicing some thinking skills. They might be sitting down with pen and paper to get clear on their priorities or get clear on their values in life and what really matters to them. They might be engaging in some experiments with conversational style and dipping their toes into networking and talking to strangers. This is a really, really common topic, which brings me to my next point. The importance of adopting an experimental mindset as you work with a coach. A lot of the time, our thinking is quite binary in life, right versus wrong, success versus failure. But if we've got an experimental mindset as we're going through some changes, what we're doing is saying each of these things I'm going to try is a little experiment. And if it doesn't work as expected, that's information, that's data. And if it does work as expected, that's information and data. And I'll build my next steps based on what I learn from this experiment. And it takes a lot of the pressure off here that whatever we try has to work perfectly. And it means that we're not as susceptible to fear of failure, that we can actually, try things without worrying just how terrible is this going to be. A big part of what I ask people to do in between coaching sessions is to reflect. Part of maintaining your focus, but reflecting on how is this working? This thing that I'm trying, this change that I'm making, how is it working? And why is it working for me? Why is this important? Well, it lets you understand the mechanism of change. If someone is practicing putting their values into action and they're finding it is improving the quality of their relationships at work and they're genuinely feeling more enthused and engaged, that's a great result. But why? Why is that result manifesting? And how are they getting there? Well, they're taking small steps and they're being open and curious. And why? Because it helps them feel very authentic as a person. It allows them to be more like the person they want to be. So that reflection, ongoing reflection, could take the form of some simple journaling and keeping scores on things, but it really helps you understand the difference you're making for yourself. And it helps you avoid feeling like the coach did this for me because the coach did. The coach didn't do that to you. And it allows you to build your self-belief, your self-efficacy, that you can use these approaches and continue to use those approaches. And finally, a focus on generalizing your wins. What do I mean by that? Coaching is a time-limited activity. We could add that to the list of myths. A very common myth is that I have a coach forever. Well, ideally, you shouldn't. And as I said, I work in 6-month programs with an individual. So if you know it's going to end, you want to maximize your focus during that 6 months, but then you don't want to have to pick up the phone to the coach every time something else is challenging or there's another change in your life or another thing you want to achieve. So generalizing the wins means understanding what you've done, how it works, that replenished toolkit you've got from coaching, and taking that toolkit and applying it in other aspects of your life. There's a very common piece of feedback I get from clients early doors when they're trying new things, and they'll say, "Oh, this is something um, I should try with my spouse," or "My spouse has noted this change in me." And the focus of our coaching is on them at work. But of course, they're one person, and that stuff will come home with them. So they realize that their relationships outside of work could benefit from some of this, that the challenges or the opportunities they experience outside of work can also benefit from using these tools. And this also contributes to their self-belief and self-efficacy, and they're being more like the kind of person they want to be, full stop. So what this means is, at the very beginning of a coaching program, I'm focused on making myself redundant as soon as possible. I want someone to lead coaching with their toolkit fully replenished and optimism that they can handle the other stuff that comes their way for the most part, rather than building a sense of dependence and need and having me on speed dial, if you like, from then on. These are very simple principles, but actually, if we put all of these into practice, we see, yeah, there's work involved in working with a coach, real effort, but the results will be far more impactful, far more superior if we're able to put these things into practice. I'm going to pause here for a second. That was quite a bit of a download there. Any questions about any of these recommendations? Any other perspectives on this? Anything you'd like me to explain again? I'll give you a moment to think about that, and you can drop it into the chat. A really common question I get about these is, well, what's the most important? And of course, I'm going to say all of them. But I think if we haven't got openness and honesty between coach and coachee, then all the efforts, all of the focus, all of that, it's not going to be for much, because we're not talking about what's authentically important to that person, and they're not openly expressing what they're thinking and feeling about their experience. So that's why I've got it at the top. But I ideally would like coaches to focus on all of these. If organizations want to introduce coaching, and this is something I help organizations do and have been doing for years, is to do it in a planned, organized way. And one of the first challenges I see is when there's no agreed ethos around coaching. So in other words, no one has decided how can coaching be used? Who are we offering coaching to? How does someone get access to coaching? And that can lead to other challenges, like coaching being seen as some kind of a reward, or coaching is only if you're, in favor with the boss, and so on. So a very important stepping stone is, before coaching begins, is agreeing, how do we want coaching to be used? Who can access it? How do they access it? How do we evaluate its impact and success? And those kinds of practical things, those ethical things, so that you're less um, taking 3 steps back for every step forward and undoing some of this stuff, and that people have a good, clear understanding that coaching is just another form of development. Second is when there's a lack of coaching standards. This can manifest in 2 ways. One, there aren't agreed standards for the external coaches that they're going to bring in. And a very common example of that I see is when someone says, I know a guy, right? I know a guy. Now, personal recommendations are very powerful, but knowing someone does not mean that you know that they are professional, that they are accredited, that they are going to be a good fit in this environment. And the second is when maybe managers want to coach, and I actively encourage that. And I train managers, and I've been doing it virtually my whole career in how to use coaching skills. But you need to ensure that they're evidence based, that they're good quality coaching skills, and they're not going to make things worse, for example. So, not just who gets coaching, but what does good coaching look like here? And who do we want to be doing the coaching? And there's a journey organizations can go on to create a coaching culture where at the far end of that journey, you've got coaching listed as one of the key skills for managers and leaders. That if someone's going to join the organization, they either have that skill or it's prioritized on their development plan if they want to manage and lead other people. But you need to start with, well, what does good coaching look like? I touched on this already. I'm putting it out there again. If coaching is viewed as a reward, then coaching will be viewed as an elite activity rather than objectively just about development. And the same applies that if it's framed as a punishment, when it's raised, someone will feel anxious. They'll feel nervous. Let me put it this way. If your manager has ever sent you a message saying, can we talk at the end of today? The ambiguity of that can leave you wondering, what do they want to talk about? Is this bad news? And it can really distract you for the rest of your day until you have the conversation. So if coaching is framed as punishment and then someone says, shall we talk about opportunities for coaching? You might wonder, what have I done wrong? Really importantly, we can't do coaching at someone. I don't take them in a room and somehow change them. Coaching is a partnership. We're working as a team, and it has to be done with someone's 100% agreement and buy-in. And therefore, it should never be framed as the last chance for someone. I have encountered this earlier in my career, and I now reject it out of hand as a coaching opportunity because coaching is not suitable when someone is one step away from being exited from the organization. I would say the most common of these pitfalls, though, even when there's a really good coaching standards framework and you've got really good coaches doing the work, if someone is working with a coach, intrinsic to that is trying new things, experimentation. And if their own manager doesn't support them in trying new things, it won't take long before they give up. They won't have a chance to spread their wings. They won't have a chance to let the rubber hit the road and try these things and notice the difference it makes. So we really need support from their manager to both notice what they're trying, give them feedback on that, and allow them some wiggle room to experiment. Now, as with the myths, it's not a finite list, but I'm flagging them as some very simple things organizations could consider before opening the floodgates to coaching. There is preparation work, there's thinking work to be done, and it's something I can help with. Now, how do we find an appropriate coach? I want to talk about standards. Um, with organizations, I often help them delineate what are the basics you need if someone wants to coach in your organization. So I want to share some of those examples now. And when I'm asked, how do I find a coach? This is what I refer to, especially if it's a friend of mine, someone in my social network. I'm never going to coach them, but I can talk to them about how they could find their own coach. This does sound basic, but you absolutely need coaching skills training, and not just a day or two if you're going to be working with people in an organization where the topics could be quite demanding. So, training in coaching skills. And if anyone is interested in doing some training, that's something I can either signpost to some sources, or if you want to have a chat about how we can help with the coaching skills training, absolutely we can do that. And when they're coaching, it's imperative they're using evidence-based methods, coaching methods that are supported by science, not just have been around for a long time, or they've used for a long time, or they like using them. They need to be able to defend them. And this is my next point. Coach needs to be able and willing to explain what they do, how they do it, how it works, and when it doesn't work. That's a scientific mindset. I get worried, and you should be worried if someone says, my method works for anyone in any context at any time, or I can't really explain it to you. It's sort of magical. It's, I don't want to show you the inner workings of it. No, this is not magic. This is science. So they need to be able to explain it. They need professional accreditation. They need to be a member of a professional coaching body, one that has ethics frameworks, professional behavior frameworks, one that has accredited their experience, the hours they've spent coaching, the training. And if they don't have that accreditation, it means either they haven't got enough hours yet, maybe they're on that journey, or they're not willing to sign up to a professional framework of ethics and professional behavior. Something that surprises my clients sometimes is when we talk about my own supervision. I undergo coaching supervision every month with a senior experienced coaching psychologist to talk about me and my development and how I can do things better. And just like therapists and counseling and clinical psychologists, we need supervision to ensure that we are looking after ourselves, we are focused on doing good work, and we're not repeating mistakes, and we're learning from anything that doesn't go quite right. And finally, they should be able to very easily offer you a chemistry session, a free conversation to answer your questions, tell you more about themselves, and importantly, find out more about you. So these I flag as the most important things that a coach should be able to have and do. It's not everything, but it's really, really the essentials. Now, I want to signpost some resources. I will be sharing with you some digital resources on the back of this via email. But you can easily, if you want to have a chat, no commitment and no cost, book a coaching chemistry session with me. I'll put a link to that in the email that I send. WorkLifePsych.tv is where you can find all of our coaching related videos. Our fortnightly podcast is called My Pocket Psych, and we do a lot of the content on that is about coaching and the theories that inform it and the methods. So it's a great way of finding out more there. And I've put together a frequently asked questions section on the website /coaching questions that answers the most commonly received questions that we get. So that's everything I wanted to share. I'd love to hear from you if there's questions you still have at this point that I haven't addressed. Any feedback or thoughts at this stage, just pop it into the webinar chat.